spark. That's your God spark. And these ancients saw this because they clearly saw what we're seeing in digital photography today. Somebody in ancient times clearly saw the same thing. You can see it. It's even in the Hindu flag. These are Dharma wheels. The wheel of samsara, this cyclic existence. We don't get off this wheel of samsara. Each one of these little dots is a lifetime, all your lifetimes, all your soul memories. You don't remember your face or what language you spoke in each lifetime. It's the soul-to-soul contact, the love, the spiritual growth type things are retained in the soul. And maybe, that's part of one of this development of cities when you can, once you become enlightened, you'll remember a lot of your past lives in a much greater detail. Not full detail, but more and more stuff comes back because it's all in there. We know all of this stuff. It's locked in our soul. It's our soul consciousness. And now the past masters left important clues. Most people hear about how the Buddha followed a real extreme form of yogiism. He almost died. When he sat under the Bodhi tree on a full moon night, remember that, the full moon night, very important. He reached a low point. His Buddha nature sank low. This is the mystical key that Buddha left us. He was at a very low point. His Buddha nature wasn't up there. It was really low. It has to go right low below the lowest chakra, and it has to flip polarity, and then it comes up. That's what happened to Buddha under the Bodhi tree. And it was on a full moon night, and it was during a total lunar eclipse. We missed that part, but I'll explain how I know this for a fact, that it was during a lunar eclipse. So he practiced a very extreme, and he realized that wasn't the path. He was almost dead. And that's where the middle way in Buddhism came, where you don't have to follow the extreme path I followed. Try this path, a lighter path, take an easier path. And there was another famous Buddhist monk who attained enlightenment when he was like 12 or 14. His name was Wei Ning. He was one of the greatest Zen masters. I think he was the sixth patriarch of Zen, Chan. He was a Chan. He lived in China. That's the guy that died, and I showed you a picture of him still sitting outside that monastery. His physical body's still there because when he stepped out of his body, his Buddha nature left. It just crystallized and it preserved itself. That's why Tsongkhapa, even Yogananda, apparently when he died, he didn't decompose. Some of these masters, when they die, they don't decompose. And that's why. It's just they just step right out of the body. It's a whole different process for them. But Wei Ning, he was just a kid, and he hauled firewood all the time. He had to work really hard as a child to support his mother. And so his Buddha nature was low, and it sunk right to the bottom. And he heard one verse of a sutra, and it flipped, and he became instantly enlightened. And that's part of the technique that I try to share with people that hasn't been shared for 2,500 years. You have to know how to make it go low and flip polarity to come up. And if you know that, and you know how to do Kriya Yoga as well, you'll attain enlightenment in one lifetime very quickly. It's not going to be this massive journey of self-sacrifice and sitting around like a stone Buddha for days and days on end. You can do it much more naturally. But these guys left the clues for me to figure out what happened, because I know what happened. So when these orbs, when this God spark within you enters the body, it attaches at the soul seat, which is just below the navel. This is where everybody ends up this way, and it has polarity consciousness. And once this inner orb enters the physical body, it's what powers up the rest of the chakra system. You can't operate on somebody and find their chakras there, but they correlate with glands. So the lowest one's connected to ovaries or testes, and the brow chakra up here is connected to your pituitary, and your crown chakra up here is connected to your pineal gland. So they are all connected to. So the human body is kind of an amazing thing, that when this orb, this God spark enters, or your soul enters a body to gain corporeal form, it powers up these etheric bodies and the whole chakra system. It's the power source for that. And it's also the power source that negative energies feed off of. It's not your physical body that they're feeding off. They're feeding off this thing. This is 1,000 times brighter than the sun. This is a very powerful thing. This is our God. This is our inner God spark. This is who we really are. But we end up leading a mind-body existence in most cases, and the soul just kind of sits there. It's not totally shut off. Some people are more connected to it than others, but it has to shift positions to become fully enlightened. And it's really what the higher self is. In terms of a Das avatar like Krishna, they can project a plenary portion, but the rest of us don't have a higher self up in heaven or something like that than a lot of channelers. The higher self is actually in your lower belly, kind of. And that's why the ritual
makes me think of the digestive. Sorry to interrupt. I'm thinking of the digestive tract and the way that the powers that be, mess with the food so much, and your digestive system is connected to other parts of your body. And now you're talking about the soul. And I've seen people's images via Kirlian photography showing their chakras. And people I know in particular that do meditation, they've got perfect chakras, and then others have very imbalanced chakras. So please continue. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And each chakra resonates at a different frequency too. So they refract. I believe they refract as God light. Each one will refract at a different tone. So like if you go right now, say Om, Om, you'll feel right at your lower chakra below your navel. You'll feel it vibrating there. And if you go all, that's the tone as close as, it's not the exact tone, but that's at your crown chakra. You'll feel this all up here. Each one has a different tone. And the Tibetan singing bowls, these bowls that they have, that make these tones, they're calibrated to each one of these chakras. So if you're stuck at your heart chakra or at your throat chakra, there's actually a singing bowl that can resonate that sound that'll help open up those chakras. Reiki practitioners can also move these through. I'm not a big fan of that, though. I think that you should learn to move this through yourself. You don't want to have somebody else using their energy to move it around too much. Like they can help open them up, but do the Kriya Yoga with yourself, and you'll gain better benefits. Because you don't know who you're really going to. Some of these people could actually be negative. They can leave holes open. A lot of people have a lot of, some of these Reiki people who call them Reiki masters, they've went on a 1 or 2 weekend course and now they're a Reiki master. In the past in India, it took decades to get to that level. So we kind of have so you got to be a little bit careful with some of that stuff, even though it's still very valid. And this causal body is really seen as the sheath for the soul. And one of the mistakes that you see is a lot of people go, I'm going to activate my pineal gland and my third eye. Your third eye is not connected to your pineal gland. It's connected to your pituitary gland. It's your crown chakra that's attached to your pineal gland. So enlightenment presents at the crown chakra. And there's singing bowls and there's mantras that can help open up every one of the chakras. But you got to have the right understanding of that, and I see that a lot in the New Age community where they're trying to attach the pineal gland to the third eye, and it's not correct. It just isn't. It's and more importantly, I've highlighted this. Please, anybody listening to this, the Buddha nature must sink below the root chakra and flip polarity and go up. And that's why you got to be able to move that through the Shushanam or your central nervous system through your more advanced meditation, but you also got to be able to flip it. And that takes a bit of technique and to do that. And you got to do it during total lunar eclipses. So all of this, it'll remove decades or if not lifetimes off everybody from attaining Christ consciousness or enlightenment. It's very, very important to understand that. And these orbs, this is influenced by magnetic and electrics, and that's why it's influenced by these dual suns coming in and out. That's why in astrology it's influenced by the position of the stars, the planets, at a more subtle level. But it's also greatly influenced during eclipses. Eclipses are real peak times that affect soul consciousness in a big way. And if you understand that, it'll take decades off. So watch this diagram very carefully now. This is what has to happen, and this is what hasn't been taught. Some shills got on and said, you can go to any bookstore and read this and find this out. Most of this stuff you can, but none of them will tell you about how it has to sink, flip, and then come up. sometimes you have to experience these things to see it, to know it, to remember it. And so just watch it. This is the technique. It's got to go low. I think I got the wrong thing here now. We got the gremlins habit. See? It's got to go low, below the root chakra, and then goes up to the crown chakra. That's enlightenment. That's the mechanics of enlightenment, folks. This is exactly what happens. The only thing is that plus to minus has to flip. And I haven't quite figured. I tried to get the animation to rotate that, but I haven't. So it's like I said, we have real cheap props here. So it's sorry for the. You also want to be real suspicious.
Hey man, you got props. That's awesome. You know, I mean, you're prepared. That's good. Yeah. And the slides are epic. This is great.
So just remember that it's got to sink low, flip polarities, during a lunar eclipse to go to the crown chakra. And that still can take years to get to that point. It's just that you could be, in the past, you could have been doing Kriya Yoga like this for 20 years and never know that you go out and do your practice during eclipses. So you miss it every time. And you know, Shakyamuni Buddha, he was right at the last days of his life. He sat under a Bodhi tree during a full moon, and he was low. It sank low in him because he was almost dead. He was giving up on life. Wei Ning was hauling firewood, extremely fatigued, and it sunk below. In the case of Eckhart Tolle, I've never read any of his books, but a friend of mine made me watch him on Oprah, just one episode, to see if she wanted me to tell her if he was a fake or if he was enlightened or not. I could see right away that he was enlightened. I didn't even watch the rest of the show. I just quick look, yeah, that guy's enlightened. Very important teacher at this time, but he apparently was almost suicidal, went to bed, and woke up the next day enlightened. I bet you an eclipse happened, and based on past life merit, he probably was a monk thousands of lifetimes, and just his soul, he was ready to ascend, but he had to reach that low point to make it go up. But the thing is, you don't have to become depressed or follow an extreme path like Buddha or haul firewood to exhaustion like Wei Ning. You can just stay up for a couple nights before an eclipse. Start writing a book before an eclipse. You got to play the mind out. And, you know, that's the main thing about meditation. Whatever meditation you learn, you know, jogging can be a meditation, punching a bag. It doesn't just have to be sitting around. Martial arts can be meditation in motion. You know, you should be able to meditate when you walk down to the post office if you understand the crystal clear awareness type meditation I describe in my book. This is the one that's really important for Westerners, because we don't want to sit around and do acting like stone Buddhas. We can get there a lot quicker, a lot more naturally in nature, just walking around with clear awareness. It's kind of a hard thing to do, but I try to highlight it in my book that how people can learn how to do that. So you can awaken yourself a lot quicker. You know, it doesn't have to be this long, arduous path. Wei Ning also taught that this Buddha nature within us is already fundamentally pure. There's nothing to purify. We're perfect already. Our defilements are coming from our minds and our bodies, or more so our minds using our bodies to do defilements. Think about every stupid thing you've ever done. It's more from the mind. There's always this little voice in the background, which is your soul conscious saying, you're being stupid now, you're doing something dumb. You know, that little voice inside all of us, that's your soul consciousness. That's what has to shift. It just has to, and when it shifts position and goes to the crown chakra, your bliss is perpetual. This is not some carrot I'm rubbing and shaking in front of everybody. The bliss is perpetual. This is the state we should all be in. And when more and more of us, this 2% all reach this, and then the 8%, and they start lifting up this other 90%, planetary ascension is going to come a lot sooner. Planetary ascension is not going to come in a wave. It's not going to come with spiritual fluff. It's going to come with ancient techniques and souls that are doing this and living this and walking this higher path. This is important to understand this. So they always talk about Shakyamuni Buddha awakens on a full moon night. That's why they have the Wesak festival that celebrates the birth, the death, and the enlightenment of Buddha. But he became enlightened on a full moon, and all lunar eclipses, Rex, occur on full moons. They can't occur any other time. You can only have, it was a blood red moon when Buddha, and somebody will say, well, Canadian on the side of a mountain know that Buddha became enlightened during a lunar eclipse. This guy's a shill. He's part of the Illuminati. He's lying to us. And how I know
Android.
how I know this is there's two reasons. I watched an eclipse one night, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Because you shouldn't claim anything. You know, when somebody lays claim to these type of things, that's the person. I'm just kind of sharing this now so that people understand that it's not just somebody who's looked at a lot of research and a lot of Vedic Buddhists. Is that I know this for fact. I really do. But there's more than that. Is that Buddha gave this teaching, and it was called the Kalachakra Tantra. He gave it to the first Kalki king of Shambhala. And this first Kalki king his name was Sachandra, and he came to the surface. I don't know if he was in a Vamana or they walked, but he came with 90 rishis. So wherever Shambhala was, whether it's on another planet or in the inner earth, they had rishis. These are holy men, but they were practicing something that was closer to modern day, what the Vedas were, the literature. They were kind of following that. And Buddha was like, no, I got something else to teach you. So everybody knows of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the five aggregates and all the stuff that Buddha taught to the general Sangha. But there was this separate teaching that he gave to this Kalki king. And we, of course, Rex, we've only got fragments of the Kalachakra Tantra. Surprise, surprise, it's back to this hiding information, things get lost. But Sachandra recorded this teaching and he returned to Shambhala. And that's really became the Kalachakra Mula Tantra. Now, the Tibetans have an abridged version of the Kalachakra Tantra, but they don't have the whole thing. And when he returned, there was some resistance at first. Some of these rishis actually left and abandoned Shambhala, but they all came back and they adopted this new teaching, and Shambhala became an enlightened society. The whole place became, these are the guys who were flying these Vimanas. They became an enlightened society because of this separate teaching that Buddha gave. And the Kalachakra is equivalent to the Buddhist unified field theory. It has everything. Workings, the cosmos, atoms, the body, everything. But here's the kicker, Rex. It has the mathematics for calculating eclipses. Right? And the esoteric Tantra practices in Shambhala, which were these higher sexual rituals, they involved a whole bunch of other stuff. Tantra is not just about sex, and that's often talked about. In Tibetan Vajra, there's 9 inner and outer yanas that you perfect before you even get to these esoteric Tantra practices. But this whole place became enlightened, and they all did their practices during total lunar eclipses. I'm not making this up. This is real. This is in this document. And it's interesting that there's this ancient story of giants, and these weren't the Anunnaki. These weren't the giants who were mining gold. I think these potentially could have been the Atlans, the Atlanteans. And there was a king that took his people underground. And I don't know the exact date, but I think it's probably roughly around the time of Moses. And they went underground, and the reason they went underground is that there was going to be a dharma, which is negative dharma, appear on the earth. The earth was heading into the dark age and going to get very ugly. And this group of people who were tall, giants, they went underground. And this is, I think, the same group of this first Kalki king who are now the people of Shambhala. These are the people of Shambhala. And it's not that crazy of a story because, like I said earlier tonight, only 25,000 years ago, there was humanoids, Denisovans, and Neanderthals all walking around on the planet. Mm-hmm. And now they're finding DNA of, so obviously we all kind of, we all interbred because there's Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA and other Asian groups. And so we got all mixed up. So we were able to interbreed, but these were separate groups of people. And I think there was potentially these giants were also separate groups, because there's a lot of fear about the Nephilim in Christianity and stuff. I don't think these people were the Nephilim. I don't think these were the Anunnaki that were mining gold and potentially doing genetic manipulations. I think these are the ones who brought these higher teachings, and there's some of them actually lived here, and they went underground. They went to the inner earth, and that's the story. And these giants are mentioned in the Torah. Moses sent scouts to find the promised land, and they came back, and said we went to Khan and we saw these giants. Like this is also it's in Buddhist literature, it's in Vedic literature, it's everywhere. There was giants on this planet. So how do these lunar eclipses really affect Buddha nature? And I'm not 100% sure, but when you get an alignment of, this is a lunar eclipse on this string here, where you have the sun, the earth, and the moon in perfect alignment, get the right thing here, is they're all charged plasma spheres. And they're fairly close in terms of proximity compared to what our binary systems are and some of the constellations in the galaxy. So the energy from this would be very intense. And it affects these aural electricities. It affects this causal body that I showed you before. These five electricities that Shri Tishwar identified. Our soul consciousness is greatly affected when this occurs. So when a lunar eclipse occurs, that's when all the Buddhas, that's when everybody on this planet becomes enlightened. That's why technique and timing are equally as important. And that's the other part that hasn't been taught for 2,500 years. You cannot go to a bookstore and find this stuff unless you buy Remember Zen and read my book. It's in there, but it's in no other book. There's elements in the Kalachakra Tantra, the fragments we have, and Yogananda alluded to some of this stuff. Because I think those Kriya Yoga masters, India, know most of this stuff too. They might not understand the full mechanics that I've shown you, though. I don't think they do. I'm not too sure. And another thing is, it could be the only time the moon matrix is down. So say there is advanced technology on the moon that creates this psychotropic waves that are creating a kind of an overlay matrix in our reality, causing souls to reincarnate and recycle back and forth. You would put those antennas on the moon. Those 5G antennas would be on the moon because they could reach anywhere. And if you wanted to last for thousands of years, you would power it by solar technology, right? The only time there's no sunlight reflecting on the moon, period, is during a total lunar eclipse. It's the only time. It's the only time that there's no sun. So maybe there really is a moon matrix. I don't know it. It could either be these these plasma spheres in alignment causing like a tunneling effect, or it could be the moon matrix is real and it's actually down. And the other one is the last known incarnation of Krishna, this Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that came in the 1400s. He's mentioned in the Vedas. He was born on the night of a total lunar eclipse. And I think it was you mentioned this now, did these people manipulate these events or incarnate during these events? And I think the answer is yes. The reason this man incarnated potentially was maybe he wanted his future disciples to realize that he incarnated during the lunar eclipse. So they celebrated his life and his death during lunar eclipses, and they would be doing their spiritual practices during lunar eclipses. I think there's a bigger connection there than we think. That's the last incarnation of Krishna. The other interesting thing is he incarnated, Krishna died on February 19th, 3102, or February 20th. Shri Chaitanya, thousands of years later, was born on that same day. If you go to, there's a famous Egyptian, because I know you're into the Egyptian stuff. It's called, it's a famous temple in Egypt, and it's got it's Ramses temple, but there's these Ptah. You've heard of the Ptah and all that stuff. Well, oh, yeah. I think Ramses is a squatter of that site. Ramses carved himself in amongst those other three people. Ramses came later. He did that later, much later. But guess what, Rex? Every year on February 20th, that right at that beam of door, a light shines right back into the statue of Ptah on February 20th. Every year. That's the only day it does it. And it's the same year that Krishna departed, same day, same date, and it's the same date that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu incarnated here. They're all the same date. I think there's something there. The day that I watched the lunar eclipse was February 20th, 2008. So there's this date. There's something about this date of February 20th that's connected here. It's kind of mind-boggling.
You know, that's fascinating, and I had an opportunity to see the total lunar eclipse that just happened. I was in Idaho, and I was in the a specific area to where I could see the full eclipse, and it was fascinating. It got cooler, the energy was incredible, and now I wish I would have been out there, and instead of just going, "Wow, man, check it out," I wish I would have been like, "Ooh," it's like, you know, freaking. But anyway, there's next time.
You know what you got to do next time, and this is the trick. Stay up for a couple days. Don't make your body unhealthy and stay up and where you're unhealthy, so you can stop the mind. You can't stop the mind with the mind. That's the biggest paradox, the biggest mistake most people make in meditation. You got to learn to let it stop, rest naturally, and that's where awareness, meditation, nature comes in. You can't fight with the mind. So if you play yourself out physically, and you're really tired, and you go out and watch one of those eclipses, and you know how to sync, you know how to cyclically move that Buddha life force through your Shushanam region, your central nervous system, you can just go out there with an empty mind and do whatever you need to do that shuts your mind off, and just let it sink naturally. Don't sit there and go out there and expect something or try to push your Buddha nature down. But if it can sink naturally and it goes below your crown or your root chakra, and you can roll. I call it the rolling forward. You got to kind of like consciously roll this orb forward, so the polarity shifts, so the plus side and negative side change. It's instantaneous. That's the Kundalini rising. That's the getting hit by the diamond thunderbolt and Zen. It's instantaneous at that point, and you'll become enlightened. You know what to do now. Like, we've done this twice now. I'm not kidding you. If you read my book and study it a little bit more, you'll know everything you need to do. And the next eclipse is in July. We get another these tetrads, triads. We got another one in July. It's another one coming up really, really quick. So timing and technique are really is important, and that's something you can't find in bookstores. And somebody said this is all can be. No, you can't. This is new. This is new. It's old. They knew it before. So I just kind of rediscovered it, stumbled across it like a fool, because it was known before. It's clearly known before. But lunar eclipses are the optimal time to shift this Buddha nature within. You must naturally bring that mind to rest. You can't fight with your mind, and you got to being really tired during one really helps. Fasting, being tired, and it has to effortlessly sink below that first. Remember, effortlessly. If you're out there trying to push it down, and your cell phone, you're checking your cell phone back, forget it. You're not ready. But if you can just zen out and spend a lot of time in nature, it'll happen. It'll happen. Everybody watching this series, you really know now what you need to do. So now that you know the astronomy of enlightenment, the mechanics of enlightenment, I've put the menorah, the seven. I think this menorah with the seven candles really represents the seven chakras, and they're just vortices. Really, a chakra is just a vortice that rings on a certain tone. It's affected by sound. It's affected by source light. It's really affected by prana, the Buddha nature, and it must go to the crown chakra. And when it shifts and goes to the top, you have God consciousness. You're connected to the Akashic records. So that's why a lot of these ancient masters' teachings are still applicable today, because they were connected to something greater than spiritual fluff and channeling and all this. They had real experience, and once they gained this Christ, they had a bigger connection. That's why I have so much faith in Shri Tishwar. This guy just wasn't somebody. This guy was one of the greatest living Kriya Yoga masters, and is really going to be the sixth Buddha. Or is he? No, he's not the Buddha. He's the next Manu, the next world king. This is an important guy, and these people left us some really important stuff. And so I've got the graphics here again. Remember, it's got to sink below, go from the soul seat to the top. It's got to sink below. and then go to the top. And you got to be able, that's why Kriya Yoga and these cyclic meditations become so important. You got to be able to do that effortlessly during an eclipse. And bang, 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 you'll know the bliss of enlightenment. And God consciousness. So, and there's scientific research that's out there. Albert Roy Davies researched the effects of magnetism. I think he was a Canadian physicist. And they actually did experiments where they put people into negative magnetic fields and they actually reached a calm state. And when they were in positive magnetic fields, they were agitated and restless. Mm-hmm. So we are actually affected in magnetic fields, but it's not so much our mind and our physical body. It's this etheric, subtle body, the soul. Our soul is affected by magnetics. And all of Western and Eastern astrology is based on the effects of fields. The stars, the position of the star, the planets, position of the moon. When you get into the nakshatras and the Vedic astrology, it's all there. Like we're affected by these binary stars. We're affected by eclipses, and we're also affected by the constellations and the planets. Everything affects soul consciousness. And Masaru Emoto actually showed how snowflakes under positive thoughts and negative thoughts form different types of snowflakes. So when Buddha said we create the world with our thoughts, he was telling us the truth. And that's why a lot of this internet fluff and these memes, it's trying to capture our thoughts and get them into the wrong place all the time. And at the lower level, these 90%, they're just getting bombarded with all kinds of stuff from governments and religions and stuff so that, we never really look within and slow the mind down and just kind of have that Zen moment and look within and find awaken to our own Buddha nature. We're all enlightened beings. It's just that it's in the wrong position. You just got to reposition it. You don't have to go to Tibet or India or find the greatest guru. You can do everything yourself now. It's all there now. And this Kala Chakra astronomy.
How to be enlightened in one lifetime.
Yeah. You're listening. So in Kala Chakra astronomy, they carefully tracked on the moon. There's nodal points above the moon and below the moon. And they called them Ra'u and Kalagni in Kala Chakra astronomy. In Vedic astrology, they call them Rahu and Ketu. They use almost, and you'll hear your Vedic astrologer talk about these all the time, Rahu and Ketu. And really, what they are is the moon and the Earth are going around the sun. Well, they appear to be. We're actually going around the sun, and when the sun crosses the point above the moon or below the moon at this Rahu and Ketu, that's when lunar eclipses occur. That's why these ancients were tracking these points, because when you know it goes to that point exactly, you know when an eclipse is going to occur. They knew this a long, long time ago. Just got lost. We lose a lot of things. And if anybody has any doubt about what really happened in 2012, is I told you earlier, right on 2012, we left the Sandus period of Dwarpa / Kali Yuga and went full on into Dwarpa Yuga. And as soon as we left that, right away in 2014 and 2015, we get these triads, these 4 lunar eclipses right after that. And then just last year, we had where Jupiter went through the belly of Virgo, and basically, the birth of a Messiah, basically, but in the heavens, occurred. And then bang, right after that, right now, we're going through these triads. And you would have saw this one in January 31st this year. The next one happens 27th, 28th of July. Europe, Africa, Australia, South America are going to get it better. And this is what I don't know. And I've already had people ask me this question, is that if you're in another part of the world where you can't see the lunar eclipse, can you still do your practices? And I don't really know, because I actually saw one, and so did Buddha and a lot of these other people. But the energy still might be right, even though you're not on the path of where the eclipse happens. So Do your practices during every lunar eclipse, total ones. Partial ones aren't nowhere near as strong, total ones. And you know how rare this is to happen, to have a tetrad and then this thing going through Virgo and then a triad? Very rare. And right after 2012. So when you look at the Shiryak Tisher's model, and then bang, all this happens. This is Hashem. This is God. This is Creator. It's time for enlightenment. We're getting all the help we can get. We just don't know the teachings yet because they were lost. But it's happening. It's we're in the zone. We missed it. And all the doomers were going to rapture dates around these tetrads. All these so-called Christian watchers, they didn't have a clue what was really happening. And I wrote a lot of them and said, you're on the wrong track here. You're trying to bring fear and doom into something again. And these are times for enlightenment. And
well, think about it. They could do that. What they're doing is they're taking that energy and harnessing it for themselves. They're keeping people shut down, the fight or flight mode. Like you said, they're taking what we should be doing and using it against us in their own bizarre way.
Yeah. Wow. And I got some slides now that are coming up that are really gonna make people sit up when you see what's been going on for so long. So I'm gonna go through this one quite quickly, but somebody who's just getting into meditation, start off with like a zazen, a vipassana, a dynamic meditation where you kind of play your body out through like physical work, and then you kind of meditate for the last 15 minutes. These are the type of meditations that really help kind of quiet the mind. Practice the nature awareness meditation, which is why it's called, in my book, The Development of Crystal Clear Awareness. So that's why nature's so important. The Tibetans have a thing called Dzogchen, which is basically meditation techniques to develop this crystal awareness, this awareness that you need, this kind of where you can walk in emptiness, go to the post office, and you're meditating, sweeping the floor and you're meditating, where you're not just sitting around like a stone Buddha anymore. But in later stages, you got to do these Kriya Yoga type meditations where you're getting this Buddha nature to move through your chakra system, through your central nervous system, or the Shushanam region, with the Kriya Yoga people talk. And you got to move it through, because when you're watching an eclipse, it's got to sink low, and you got to be able to move that effortlessly without your mind doing it. So it takes time to develop that. And really what a Kriya Yoga practitioner does in these advanced, like if you're doing like the third Kriya, on the in-breath, you breathe in really deep, so you get that prana ingestion where the life force is coming right down to the soul. And then you imagine the Buddha nature, this orb that's stuck at the soul seat, slowly going up as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, you go the opposite way, and then it goes back up again, so that your Buddha nature is essentially going up and down, up and down. And then when you get to the fourth Kriya, they start doing where they just do it between the top chakras. And it allows you to get a real focus of this consciousness and to be able to move it. And another thing they do is they repeat mantras. So they'll repeat the mantra of Krishna, which is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, and like on the first chakra as it comes up, it's Om Namo Bhagavat, and then Vasudevaya all the way down. And they repeat this mantra at each chakra. And it's a very powerful mantra because, Krishna was the Jagannath Guru. You say his name and you're going to get the benefits of that mantra. So don't just make up a mantra. You can make up a mantra if you're a Christian around Om Yeshua Ben Joseph Bhagavat. You could make one up for Krishna. The monk Tibetan monks already have them for Om Awab, one for Guru Rinpoche, which is Padmasambhava. They can use the same one. So you got to have a mantra that has one of these names and these greats, and you do the cyclic breathing. And so you want to get into these more advanced Kriya Yoga type meditations as you advance. So take your time, don't rush into any of this, but the 3 steps you really need to take. Somebody watching this, because if I drill down and to do this properly we got another 3-hour presentation that we have to do into meditation. But just know that you got to do, you got to get that life force moving to really get the real benefits and reach the final state of enlightenment. So these ancients knew about this timing and technique. They knew this in our past, and it goes before time of Krishna and Rama even, because go Bleki Tepe meditation. But just know that you got to do, you got to get that life force moving to really get the real benefits and reach the final state of enlightenment. So these ancients knew about this timing and technique. They knew this in our past, and it goes before time of Krishna and Rama even, because go Bleki Tepe is one of these ground calculators that can predict eclipses, and I'll show you how they did that now. And it's ancients knew about this timing and technique. They knew this in our past, and it goes before time of Krishna and Rama even, because go Bleki Tepe is one of these ground calculators that can predict eclipses, and I'll show you how they did that now. And it's 12,000 BC. They knew this before most religions were around. This has been known for, this is not new age fluff. This is old age truth. This is known in our past. See, the same thing. Got to keep, it's got to go, it's below the navel. That's your soul seat, but it's got to go below the chakras first to go up. And in Buddha's case, he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, almost reaches the point of death. Eckhart Tolle's case goes to bed, almost suicidal. And in Wei Ning's case, he's hauling firewood and he's fatigued. Here's a line of a sutra and bang, he's enlightenment. Lunar eclipses probably occurred in all three cases. Got to sink below and then go up. This is the key. This is very important to understand that simple little diagram, so you know what meditations and what you got to do in your practice and what you got to master yourself, because no galactics are showing up with enlightened beds. No, this is just not going to happen. It's just more fluff. So in the Vedic, it's, people say Vedic or Vedic, but it's the Hindus pronounce it Vedic. So I had one Hindu get on my case about pronouncing it wrong, but I do both just to kind of let Christian or the Westerners, you know, I think he can really pronounce it both ways. But they have this sidereal zodiac, which is a 360 band degrees around, and it's divided into 12 bands, just like Western astrology. But they let the constellation complete, so they're not all equal pies, even though when you see them in a chart, they're equal pies. And so the stars are fixed against the planetary motion, so they're incorporating the precession, the equinox, in this Vedic astrology. And then they go a step further. They also have these 27 nakshatras, and you've heard about this with the person, the lady, what's her name, Heidi, I think, that comes on. And if somebody wants a chart, like I'm the type of astrologer that I'm not good at charts. You really want to go to somebody like that does it all the time, because then they start seeing the patterns and they become experts in that. You got to kind of almost specialize your whole life just around that to be good at that. I'm more concerned about the enlightenment aspects of this stuff. And the interesting thing, most people think that there's only 27 nakshatras. And when you drill down into these ancient scriptures, there's actually 28. And it's called Abhijita, and it's the king of the nakshatras, but it's hidden. And the reason it's hidden is it's only occurring when these lunar eclipses occur, because this is a time for spiritual practice. So they hide it. They have their whole system worked out, and this 28th is only pulled out when eclipses happen, because they knew the spiritual potential of this as well, and it was a time of worship, and they were also tracking these nodal points. So it's all right there in front of us. They knew this in the past. It's there. So they were monitoring this sidereal zodiac, and they divided it into 12 groupings. But guess what? When you start looking at these megalithic sites, so it's kind of blurry, but you can see here, this is basically the Vedic astrology here, where it's divided into 12, just like the Western astrology, and then they divide it down into 27 nakshatras. The 28th is hidden. Some people wrote in and said, there isn't 28. This guy is not, doesn't. There's 28. Go do your research. There's 28. I'm telling you, there's 28. It's just goes back way a long time ago, and it's a spiritual It's about the eclipses occurring. But when you look at this Armenian Stonehenge, or the one in Nabta in Egypt, this is Stonehenge in Egypt, or in the UK, and this is this OMAC wheel out in the Alberta Prairie. You can see that all of these devices are representing this ancient sidereal zodiac. This one in Alberta that's 5,000 has a precise 5,000 year calendar, plus or minus 200 years. You know, the Mayan calendar is 5,125 years, and we got this other precise calendar on the prairies of Alberta that's 5,000 plus or minus 200 years. I think they were monitoring the same thing. And if you look at this site really carefully, there's 28 spokes radiating out from this, representing the 28 lunar days. Stonehenge is a bit different on the outer. There's peg holes all the way on the outside, but there's 56, twice as many as 28. And the reason they went to 56 is they wanted better accuracy. So there's more. It's more accurate. You get a device that can predict lunar eclipses within 99.8% accuracy with Stonehenge. And this one over here is would be 98% accurate. So you get a slightly better accuracy. They can predict, and the reason they needed to do this, Rex, is you can't just kind of look out and say, I see it's a blood moon tonight, and you race out and start doing your practice. You haven't slowed your mind down. They wanted to know a few days in advance when these things were coming in, so their students could all practice of slowing the mind down, start doing the pranayama, start doing the kriya yoga, start preparing, start wearing their minds out for these eclipses. That's why they needed to know this in advance. We knew this. We knew this in our past. And I'll show you exactly how Stonehenge worked. And it's pretty cool. This is the block formation of Stonehenge. And, you know, there's a lot of shills saying that this was put up in the 50s. They did take cranes and try to fix some of these things that had toppled over. But Odbury was looking at this in the 1600s. And he noticed on the outside there was of these 56 holes on the outside. And I'll show you how they did this, and they did it very accurately. Is if you can imagine the center of Stonehenge as the earth. And if you're tracking the sun and the moon's position, that when the moon is over here and the sun is on the opposite side and the earth is in the middle in a straight line, you know a lunar eclipse is going to occur. Or sorry, a solar eclipse is going to occur. Or sorry, that would be a lunar eclipse. And when they both come close together, and the moon is here and the sun is right here and they're in a straight line, then it's going to be a new moon and a solar eclipse will occur. And how they did this without actually just doing a measurement every day is that if you move the peg holes for the moon 2 places every day, you went out to this site and moved it 2 places, and every 13 days you go out and move the peg holes for the moon, this device will accurately predict within a 99.8% accuracy when eclipses are going to occur. And Göbekli Tepe can do the same thing, and it's 12,000 years old. So a lot of people are always wondering what all these sites are for, and I think it was Alex Collier that said that in the future that we would find out what all these sites are for, all these ancient sites. And if anybody's watching this tonight, you've just learned, and I say this humbly, you've just learned what a lot of these sites are really for. They were made by our ancients, and these people flew around in Vimanas, and this technology was shared. A lot of this stuff comes back from the Golden Age. They knew how to do this, and they wanted us to find these sites, and that's probably why Göbekli Tepe was buried. And then I thought, well, maybe these crop circles are telling us something too. And I'll show you some neat things. Is this one down here, if you see, it looks like a man. It looks like a butterfly. You see that? And then there's 4. This one appeared. Most of these are appearing within a couple kilometers from Stonehenge. So now we all know, watching this, Stonehenge can predict eclipses. So now we see all these weird crop circles coming up around Stonehenge. Guess what this one is? I think what it's telling, like, this is just my interpretation. Like, this is not out of some Vedic scriptures or anything, but you see, it's talking about the tetrads coming. This one appeared just before the tetrads, and it's talking about these tetrads coming into full eclipses here, and it's talking about the, you know, a worm turns into a butterfly. Well, this man turns into an enlightened being during eclipses, and this is, I think, these extraterrestrials making these ones are the blue skin, the good guys. They can't come down here and tell us this exactly, but they can leave us clues. And I think they've been hoping for years and decades that somebody down here is going to figure this all out. And here's another one that showed up just before the tetrads, and it's got the Christian cross right through the middle, and it's talking about these are eclipses. You can see that this is the moon and the sun. This is eclipses. It's talking about the Christ conscious potential of these eclipses, I think. And here's another one talking about the eclipses. The eclipses is coming up, and you can count this one out, and it goes right. Some of these, even these decoding, some guy decoded one of these, and it was actually telling the date of a lunar eclipse in ancient writings. You know, mind-boggling, right? I think somebody's got to look at these crop circles with bigger consciousness. I think these people aren't looking at this because they don't know about Stonehenge can predict eclipses, and they can predict eclipses for spiritual purposes, and it's to predict lunar eclipses and solar eclipses so we can all become enlightened. That's what these devices are for. Our ancients knew this, and it's kind of time that we learn it again. And then we've got this Göbekli Tepe. It came in right when these two, right when they were in perihelion, you know, when it wasn't lens flare in those days, the real perihelion. And whoever built this site, which were probably the remnants from Atlantis, the people, helped our ancestors build these sites, and it was buried by stones, the whole thing. And you see these little grooves on the top? You could use the shadows into the center stones and just use chalk rather than those peg holes to mark where the positions of the moon and the sun are. And so anytime you see a circular megalithic rock outcrop like this, and especially Stonehenge and the one in Alberta, are right on 51-degree latitude. Both sites, one on different continents, are right on 50, because that's when you get that 90 degrees I mentioned of this midsummer moonrise, midsummer sunset. So you can exactly predict when the solstice occur, but you can only do that on 51-degree latitude. And we have two of these sites. So as they look for more of these sites, 51-degree latitude is probably the best place to be looking for them, because there's going to be more of these. They found Woodhenge, Megahenge. These things are all over the world. And you can see that this wasn't a cataclysm that buried this. This was the builders or the people who came after buried this site. And I think they did it because they knew the duel was coming in, and there's a shakeup period. That's why I think some of those ancient temples in South America, you know, where it looks like the blocks have been all thrown apart, that probably occurred during when this happened, 11,500 BC, when these duels came in. And they knew that we would find these sites, we'd dig them up, and eventually somebody would come along and figure out what they were for. And this is the 5,000-year calendar in Omak, Alberta. And you can see it a bit better here, though, but this one's exactly on 51-degree latitude, just like Stonehenge. The diameter of the outer circle is the same as Stonehenge. They could just place rocks at each one of these points, and they would get 98% accuracy for predicting eclipses. This site can predict eclipses. You know, the natives built medicine wheels too to celebrate great chiefs or a great hunt. This site is more than that. This site was for predict, and it's a 5,000 plus or minus 200-year calendar. And then we have the Mayan calendars as 5,125 years, and it ends in 2012. Maybe this one was ending at the same time. The researcher that found this site said that the natives stopped using it about the time the white man came to North America. Shortly when we started settling the West, they stopped using it. His name was Gordon Freeman. The guy was a genius that found this site, and he was looking outside the box. He wasn't like most researchers, but he doesn't know about the lunar eclipses and why they were doing it. I told him about it, but when you start talking about Vimanas and blue skin people building these, you know, it gets into like seasoned scientific researchers like, this guy's smoking something, right? Like it's you.
They're not going to listen to that, man. You need that Harvard. You need something prestigious like that, and you can't talk about blue people because that's when they just lose it.
Yeah. And then they found them in they found them in Armenia. They're in Egypt. They're all over the world. These and then we've got these Nazca lines in Peru. And there was a lady, her name was Maria Rekic, who discovered that the whole series of lunar and solar eclipses occurred during the time they made the Nazca. They're not landing strip for aliens. They were following these nodal points, and these lines were designed to help line up these nodal points. So they were there for predicting eclipses. So as we got later on in time, the megalithic structures weren't as fancy, but these ancients, I think, were still helping us probably all the way up until the last Dwarpa Yuga, roughly the time of Krishna or shortly after that. We were getting helped. And once we went full on into the Dark Age, I think these higher worlds just pulled back. And we'll see them again. There will be kind of like first contact, I think, at some point. But I think all these people who are talking about it and trying to run that narrative and stuff, I think a lot of them are disinformation agents. I can feel energy. There's a lot of people out there that aren't really telling us the right things, and they're part of this. And it's still okay to listen to them though, because they always give 20-30% of the truth. So you listen to enough of them, you get a general idea. But go back to this ancient stuff. Like, this is not fluff. This is not. You're getting taught something that's really important here. And any viewers watching this, please send it off to other sites, New Age sites, wherever. If this resonates with you, feel free to share it with other groups and stuff like that. Because I don't really have a website, and I only do these interviews very rarely. And but it's an important message. It really is. And so feel free to help spread this message if it sits right with you. And then we have this Antikythera mechanism. I told you about this before. They found it in a Greek shipwreck. It's 2,000 years old. And it's an analog. Look at the gearing ratio. I think this thing even has the precession, the equinox built into it. And it can predict eclipses till infinity. So you tell me why some Greek people 2,000 years ago built such a complex analog computer for predicting eclipses. They knew this stuff. This is not, like I said, it's not New Age. This is Old Age. We knew this stuff in our past. We really did. How did it spread? I believe these Vimanas, these ancient people flew these Vimanas and took this technology everywhere. And in the Vedas, it actually talks about 4 types of Vimanas. 2 were continental, 1 was intercontinental, and 1 was interplanetary. And the fuel they use, there's quicksilver and rasa. And I don't know which one's which, but I assume the rasa was for the continental and intercontinental, and the quicksilver, which probably had a mercury base, was for interplanetary. We were flying interplanetary in our past. People came here, and that's where this ancient stuff in the laws of Manu and the stuff that Shirak Trishwar and about the binary sun. That's how we know this, because we haven't recorded our history on this planet enough to know this. It came from somewhere else. And in the Ramayana War, they used super weapons, Brahmastra weapons, like bigger than atomic bombs. There was one weapon that could destroy a whole planet. Wow. So maybe Mars got hit by one of these Astra weapons that can wipe out entire planets. There were some awful weapons in our past too. And so they flew. There's UFOs. Vimanas are basically UFOs, flying machines in our past. So these ancients knew about the magnifying effects of eclipses on universal energy. And this is where it kind of gets interesting. The Babylonians and Chinese were able to predict eclipses as early as 2500 BCE. A long time ago, right? Like, that's like 4,500 years ago. These people could predict them. And the Tibetans believe that one's good deeds or bad deeds are multiplied during solar and lunar eclipses. And This is this woo energy, the universal energy that affects the Buddha nature, affects the etheric bodies. And so lunar and solar eclipses are important days in any practitioner's life. In a solar eclipse, this universal energy, during the solar eclipse, because this is a lunar eclipse, and the three balls on a rope, this is a lunar eclipse. Solar eclipse is slightly different. That's when the moon gets in between the sun and the earth. But universal energy is magnified 10,000 times. And I'm going to show you in some slides. People are going to be shocked when they see how many wars, how many people came to power, things like that during lunar eclipse or solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. The left-hand path people know this. It's time that we know it too. And lunar eclipses affect universal energy about 1,000 times. So don't start going out and doing pranayama and the Kriya Yoga during solar eclipses. Solar eclipses really should be the time where there's no fear and that you're thinking about the golden age and the future, and you're calm, and we're sitting in circles and we're doing these sit-ins, universal meditations. Those things should occur during solar eclipses because it gets magnified 10,000 times. And during a lunar eclipse, that's when you sit down and do your Kriya Yoga, stop the mind. That's when the Buddhas all wake up. And everybody listening to this is a Buddha, just sleeping Buddhas. Just wake up, Buddhas. It's time for people to wake up. Don't be a sleeping Buddha anymore. Be an awake Buddha. That's your God-given right as a sentient being, is to live in full consciousness. And why not? It's not a carrot in front of the donkey sort of thing. It's perpetual bliss. It's these ancients wouldn't have taught this because they know it's the only way to end cyclic existence, get off the reincarnation track and go on in your journey. But it's also, it increases the energy. That's why I was saying earlier, individual ascension, individual enlightenment, when there's millions and millions of people attaining this, then we really are going to lift the consciousness. It's a symbiotic relationship between our solar system and the sentient lives. And it's kind of funny, ancient Chinese and some of these dragon societies, they convinced everybody that a dragon was eating the sun during solar eclipses. They freaked everybody out. Everybody would go outside banging pots and screaming to scare the dragon away. Maximize that fear 10,000 times. You know who's doing that? It's the old negative ones. The left-hand path people have been playing us with this for millennia, forever. They know this. And 2 Chinese court astrologers were actually executed for failing to predict solar eclipse. They got off because it was a big no-no. They screwed up. The dragon was eating the sun and people weren't out there in fear to scare it away. And then eclipses also occur around birth and deaths of kings, emperors, and prophets. The Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was born after a total solar eclipse in 569. Muhammad's son died during the solar eclipse in 632. King Henry died shortly after a solar eclipse in 1133. Prince William was born in 1982 during a partial solar eclipse because the king's power is magnified. It doesn't have to be a full solar eclipse. And some of these events that occur around the world, wars and all kinds of bad events, always occur during solar eclipses, just before, just after, because, eclipses are kind of a funny thing. Have you ever been you remember going to nightclubs back in the 80s when everybody could smoke, and if the light was just right, if you saw somebody blow smoke, a cigarette smoke in the air, you'd see those swirls, and it was kind of like Mandelbrot, it would swirl up into the air, and all these. An eclipse is kind of the same thing, is that, around each planet or each plasma, the sun and everything, there's a big magnetic field. So days before the alignment occurs, the effects start days before and they go for days. Sometimes that energy can go on for weeks and months after these eclipses occur. So it doesn't have to be right on the day. And if you start doing your research, Rex, all these 8.3 earthquakes and stuff we've been having over the last, you go back and look at every one of them, just about is usually a week or two before a lunar eclipse or a week or two after a lunar eclipse. I'm not making this up. So it affects that pull and that plasma alignment starts affecting the earth, and that's why we get these big earthquakes always right around the time. So you watch when this July one comes, I'll guarantee you there's going to be some big earthquakes. 10 days, it's usually about 2 weeks to 10 days before one. I'll guarantee you, you're going to see like a 7.9, an 8.0 somewhere. Fortunately, a lot of the ones during the tetrads and the last triad, they were away from populated areas and stuff like that, but they always occur. You know, and Vladimir Putin came to power in 1999, on July 9th, 1999, and July 11th, 1999, total solar eclipse occurred. It gives magnifying power to the new ruler. You know, I don't think it by accident. I don't know. And then, as I mentioned before, Donald Trump was born on June 14th, 1946, on the evening of a total lunar eclipse. That's where I said it could be positive with him or negative. Could really go either way. A lot of people thought I was, you know, on the Trump train. I just respect that, because from a Vedic perspective, I think it's potentially a positive thing with him, but it can go either way. Like the Buddha said, it can either magnify good or bad. It can be either way. So you got to kind of don't jump on any bandwagon, but, you know, it's just kind of interesting, right? It's kind of interesting. And then, you know, this is a quote: "Those who do not look to the stars will be lost forever unto those who fated their destiny upon them." Now, when you read that, it sounds like that came from Buddha or some guru or something. That's from a banker, one of these elite families. I can't remember which one said it. One of these elite families said that. So, you know, they pay a lot more attention to astronomy and astrology than they let everybody know. They're also into numerology and stuff. So a lot of these weird events and stuff that are going on around the world right now that will keep happening, sometimes they're tied to astrological type things, and sometimes they're tied to numerology too. It's both. It's both. So the left-hand path people know this, and they've known it for a long time. And you often talk about, you know, the eclipses in Egyptian mythology, where Seth stole the moon eye from Horus, and Thoth searched for it in the darkness to restore it. You know, it's basically talking about eclipses. And Egyptians could predict eclipses weeks in advance. They had that ability. Some of them believed they were omens to get the people into fear, offered sacrifices to Ra. They often, outbreaks occurred during eclipses, because eclipses also do purify things. And so if something's going wrong in some place, eclipses, and as these suns move back together, now that we're in Dwapara Yuga, it's my personal belief that these eclipses and these triads that are coming up right now and the ones after that, they're going to be more powerful. And I think even astrologers and astronomers should realize that their charts are going to be off the chart, sort of thing. There's going to be more energy behind their charts now, because we're into Dwapara Yuga now, and you've got to compensate for that. And I'm curious if all of these different astrologers are starting to notice this, that they see the patterns that they normally look for, but if the effects are even greater than they normally were. And I think that the case is probably the case. And then there was the Battle of Eclipses, where between the Medes and the Lydians, actually ended during a solar eclipse. There was an ancient battle in 585 BC or 585 BC where the eclipse occurred, and it freaked everybody out. And a year earlier, Thales predicted this eclipse, and everybody thinks Thales was this big mastermind. How did he know this? And I just showed you the Greek shipwreck that found the anti-Tychothera mechanism that could predict eclipses. I guarantee you Thales had one of those, and he was just turning the dial. He wasn't some great seer, fooling people. He had the technology. He had one of those Greek, he had an anti-Tychothera device. I'm certain of it. Or maybe he knew how to use one of these Stonehenge rock circular outcrops. But they knew this. And eclipses occurring around major events. The war between Alexander and Darius in the ancient times. eclipse occurred just prior to that battle, a lunar eclipse. Soon after the death of Augustus, there was a lunar eclipse. There's people saying that after the crucifixion, there was a blood moon. Fall of Constantinople, 6 days after, lunar eclipse. Like these things are connected. There's more to this than people would ever imagine. And then I remember showed people this wall of all these enlightened people. We got to go back to these ancient teachings. These ancients left us not so much back into religion, but these ancient teachings have everything we need to know to take the evolution of consciousness into our own hands. I did a real silly thing. I forgot Osho or Bhagwan on my last one. And, if you ever want to read two books, Memoirs of a Great Zen Master and Only One Sky by this guy. This guy was another important teacher. And guess what? I think his community, there were some people kind of corrupt in his community, and they tried to make it look like it was just a cult, and it was all about money and stuff. And I've known like some ex-hippies and stuff that went to this guy, and a lot of people had a lot of money and they were just giving it to this guy because they were getting so much back from him that it was just kind of like, let's start an ashram and let's get this golden age on the go. And they say that he was poisoned by the CIA. The United States government arrested this guy. And one of the guys, John Hogue, you interviewed, told you about this, how the Bhagwan was poisoned. And he's right. This guy was bringing enlightenment to the West. And back in the time, the time of Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. as the vice president, they didn't want people thinking, they didn't want this kind of stuff. Like they still needed to have wars and all this other stuff. Some of these guys have paid the price. They've paid a high price for bringing their teachings forward. And I really do think that guy was poisoned. And also,
there's a can I jump in real quick on that, just because it's pertinent to that? There's a documentary coming out, or maybe it's even out now on Netflix. And I don't know what spin they're pushing on it, but it's directly about what you just brought up. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's fascinating. Another synchronicity there. Wow.
Yeah. But just look at these faces, like this is the 16th Karmapa. The 17th Karmapa is alive now. He's over in New York right now, actually, I think. But look at the face. These are all illumined people. This is Lahari Mahasaya, which received the Kriya Yoga from Babaji. And this is the guy they say is going to be the sixth Buddha, the Buddha that, as the changing of the guard happens over the next sort of 700-year time period. And this is Shirkteshwar, who becomes the next world king. So the Kalki Avatar and the current Manu pass on the reins to these two guys. And they were the gurus of Yogananda and Ananda May. And, this guy, Ravi Singh, he's alive. He teaches in India. Gurnath, this is the current lineage holder of that Kriya Yoga. So if you really want to learn Kriya Yoga, go into Hamsa Yoga, study this guy's teaching. This guy's alive. He's teaching right now. He comes to America all the time. And he's the one who gave me, well, he didn't give it to me directly, but he's talking about this changing of the guard and that why I believe the Great Awakening is going to happen in North America. He's saying that these guys will incarnate in North America, on the west coast of North America, and they will teach up and down the west coast of North America in the future. And the Great Awakening, like Padmasambhava said, is going to happen on Turtle Island. It's going to happen here. Like the teachings are here. Eckhart Tolle's in Vancouver. I don't think this is not by mistake. I think that our Great Awakening is going to happen here in North America. And I think these Taras, because I only got one woman. I know there's more than one woman enlightened on this planet right now. But I haven't seen any of their teachings and stuff to throw them up here. But I think these 21 Taras of Atisha are going to incarnate. And, their time is now too. We're in the zone. These great women are coming. They're going to, the fifth Buddha is apparently going to proclaim women as the change agents of this next cycle that we're entering. So it's women are really going to play an important role in this, the divine feminine, whatever you want to call it. But because we're a dark age is very masculine. We're 50-50 now. The balance is going to come back a lot quicker, and I think you're going to see a lot of people are going to be surprised just how fast this change happens now. But if you're a spiritual seeker, it's very important not to fall for this spiritual fluff and all the channeling and how galactics. It's interesting to know, and I really think the higher worlds are working with us, but they're not going to bring money and enlightenment beds and leave all these false promised dates that never happen. We need to be more critical, and we need to go back to the basics again and focus on enlightenment. And get away from this fluff. And I'm seeing the same thing with this wave or this event now being propagated all over the internet, and people I see the despair that's coming from people. I've seen this 15 times now since the 70s, and it's a harvest. It's a build them up, bring them down, build them up, bring them down. And you got to be careful with channeling, because everybody has that ability to channel, but a lot of times they're not channeling who they think they are. Archons like to play tricks. And just because somebody's under hypnosis doesn't mean all of a sudden they've reached a place of truth. When Tibetans use oracles, they get them into a trance. And usually these are highly like the Nanking oracles, a highly spiritualized being. They get them into a trance where they split. And it's basically like being under hypnosis or channeling, and they know that the mountain spirits, the archons, are they play games and they give misinformation. So the Tibetan Sangha might receive some information from an oracle, but they might only put like a 10% weight on it. It's just extra information, right? Sometimes it's very valuable information. Like it was an oracle that told the Dalai Lama that he wasn't safe anymore in Tibet. You got to leave now. But they know that the archons and they call them mountain spirits that play games. So you got to be really careful, all these people talking about this event when they're under hypnosis, because they could be, it's the exact same thing, put a 15% weight on it, because I kind of told you where we're at in our Yuga cycle, and I think it's right. I really do. And I've told you a lot about what you need to do to attain enlightenment. This is the important stuff. I'm not going to be doing this forever. So it's a hard message to get out when there's just so much spiritual fluff out there. I hope people lift their game in this, because we've been misled, and it's for a reason. It's just to keep everybody in these pens, break free of it and take the evolution of consciousness into your own hands. And you'll have a glowing face like these men and women on this picture here. Yeah. So that's it. I don't know if there's questions or you want to talk about things more.
There are some questions, and we've been going for about 4 hours now.
Oh,
and
really?
I know that you said that you don't want to do too many more interviews, but I would be honored if, and I know everybody else here that's listening would be honored as well, if maybe you could come back sometime in the future if you get time. If not, I totally get it. Answer a few questions from the audience and talk to us a little bit more about some of the meditation practices if you get time in the future.
Yeah.
All right, what's that?
I would like to do that, and I'm kind of in the position or in the space now. I don't want to talk about ancient. This guy said this guy. I don't want to talk about the ancient stuff anymore. I just want to give the teachings that I know now in this time frame and in this era. I wouldn't even go through all of this stuff, but people need to know that, because they need to know the connection to the past, so they know what they're being taught right now has some truth and some relevance. It's the only reason I've done this is, you want me to, I'll close the share screen then.
You missed these two guys in the picture. The two people that you could have put in there, Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted, they saved the world. And how do they save the world? By being excellent to each other. It's about as simple as it gets. If everybody could be excellent to each other, I think that we would be in such a higher form of enlightenment. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there a little bit as a joke, but at the same time, very serious. Truth and humor right here, folks. Being excellent to each other and following these practices that have been shared with us from Sheldon. I mean, I wish I could go back to the eclipse that we had recently that night, because I was there. I experienced a total lunar eclipse, and I would have been in a totally different mindset, and I would have focused out some serious energy into the universe that way. I mean, you're sharing some information. I mean, these are like gems of priceless knowledge. These are beyond gems that you can put in your hands, because these are gems in the mind. That, I mean, this is mind candy at its finest. This is incredible.
Yeah, and it's time for people to know this, because it's we really are in the zone. We're fully on into Dwarpa Yuga now, and now's the time. We're in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Absolutely. Yeah, the sweet spot.
I'm trying to shut down this share screen, and it doesn't want to go.
You're not sharing it? No, we're good. I just see just your video and then my video when I'm talking. So no more screens up. We're good.
Okay, there it is.
The gremlins are at bay. So yeah, thank you again, and love to speak with you in the future, folks. Definitely click this link for this book, Zen Awaken, Buddha-Nature Within. Click the link. It's on Amazon. It's, I mean, super affordable, and I can't wait to get my autographed copy. Super excited about it. And one more thing I want to throw out also is a lot of people have been asking about these hats, and I do have a few of them left. I wanted to show you guys what the liners look like inside. These are liners that actually
How much money have I got in my account? How much did you take it? How much did you take it?